Welcome to the First Lutheran Church podcast, produced by First Lutheran Church in Janesville, Wisconsin. We are a congregation of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America who are seeking to embrace love's adventure together. In this podcast series, we explore some of the contours of that adventure through conversations with friends and members of the community who are on the journey with us. We're glad you've joined us.
Hi friends, this is Renee at First Lutheran Church, and today we're sitting down with Jessi Garvin to talk about herself. So I'm excited to hear what she's got to say. Miss Jessi, what'd you do today?
But I had class today. I drove up to Whitewater and had my gender and communication class and my sound and image and film class today.
Okay, gender and communication. That is not a topic that I would have studied growing up. What is that about?
So that class specifically is about how masculinity and femininity have formed, and a lot of what we refer to as the rhetorical shaping and the rhetorical messages behind those. So like today we were talking about masculinity and men's rights movements.
Men's right movements?
Yeah, so we were talking about the difference between what we called pro-feminist and masculinist movements, where pro-feminists were like the men's rights activists who were working with feminists and trying to get equality that way, whereas the masculinists were more of like the Andrew Tate type, men need to go back to traditional masculinity and stuff like that, and just talking about the merits of each of them and where they come from. It's really cool.
Oh man, Jessi, just listening to you, I feel like I need to go back to school. So, well, speaking of school and what you've been up to, let's start out a little bit lighter. Let's back it up and let's talk about a favorite hobby. I know you've got some hobbies out there.
Oh, I have a lot of hobbies. My favorite hobby recently is I've been getting back into music. I kind of fell out of music for a couple of years, just because I was so busy I didn't have time. But I've been pulling out my ukulele and teaching myself tabs again for the first time since probably high school.
Ukulele. What are you gonna go ukulele caroling with the church here?
If I have time, I want to do that this year. I've been trying to do it. It's just that it's always on a night that I look at my schedule. I'm like, oh, I have 4 tests due that weekend. I don't have time to go caroling.
Oh man, student life. And
1 more year.
Congratulations. And what's your degree going to be in?
I will have a bachelor's from the College of Letters and Sciences in liberal studies.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's a general studies program. So the way that the liberal studies program at Whitewater is built, it's they use liberal in the term of everything, because it used to be that studying was always called liberal studies.
Okay. Because
it's just the general, I had to take a liberal studies 101 course that was basically, we just went through each school that counts under the liberal studies umbrella and what all we would learn from that, and which ones we wanted to focus on. It was really in depth for just an introduction to my major class.
Yeah, hey friends out there, if you have students who are starting to go to school, they need to talk to Jessi. It sounds like she's got her stuff together here. There's no doubt about that. Well, let's hop into a couple other things. I know you have a lot of other hobbies, so
yeah. That's just the first one that came to mind.
That's right. Can you think of a book that really changed your life?
Yeah. There's a lot of them.
We'll pick a couple or one that you want to share with us.
I think one, this is going to be a little insane. So one recently has been I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Okay, I haven't read it, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, so it's her memoir. For those who don't know, Jeanette McCurdy played Sam on iCarly, and I grew up watching iCarly. It was a huge thing for me. I was right in the age demographic for it.
This is Nickelodeon, right?
Yeah, this is Nickelodeon, Dan Schneider, all that stuff. And for those who don't know, Dan Schneider, who produced most of the biggest Nickelodeon shows, Drake and Josh, iCarly, Victorious, all that stuff, he had a lot of allegations against him and was forced to leave Nickelodeon. And now, so Jeanette McCurdy in I'm Glad My Mom Died talks a lot about how growing up in that environment with Dan Schneider and also with a extremely overbearing, extremely untreated mentally ill mother who was a stage mom and really pushed her into stuff, how all that really affected her and how it affected her views on acting and just where she wanted her life to go. And I just thought that was so eye-opening, Because when I was a kid, I always like looked up to all those child actors. I was like, oh, I want that to be me. I do not want that to be me anymore.
Oh,
After reading I'm Glad My Mom Died.
So that was the takeaway from it? That was the changing point? Was that just the eye-opening part, or was there more to that then?
Well, I think the most eye-opening part for it is just that, like, I mean, I've had my issues with my mother in the last couple of years. I'm very open about that, especially since, you know, I live with my dad, so people ask questions. So I guess it's just really interesting to hear more, because my mom was kind of a stage mom when I was younger. Because this is a bit of a flex. When I was in high school, I took modeling classes.
Whoa,
but
Jessi.
But it was because I took them. My mom talked me into them because she explained them as like acting classes, and it was going to teach me how to do commercial work and all that stuff. And it was fine. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that I would have done if my mom hadn't pushed me into it.
Sure.
And just from like having that experience of like having to go through modeling school, and I did a little bit of modeling for a couple of years. This sounds like
I did not know
I was
this.
like, it sounds like I'm trying to brag, but I'm really not. It was only for like 1 or 2 years, but because I really didn't enjoy it.
Oh, okay.
It made me so much more aware of how I looked and like how I was presenting myself in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable.
Oh.
So that was part of why I backed up and went back to, I kind of moved away from screen and modeling and back onto the stage when it came to acting.
All right.
So,
All right. Well, so you have a little identification with that book there.
Yeah.
Feel a little kinship there. All right. And you have been part of First Lutheran. How long? What's your experience with First Lutheran?
So I started coming to First Lutheran when I was 6 after my parents got divorced, which sounds bad. But it's because my parents both worked Sunday mornings, and because they both worked at Perkins when I was a kid. So once my parents got divorced when I was around 6, my dad switched to factory work, and he was able to start bringing me to church.
Oh. Okay. And your family, I know your family has a history.
Oh,
here.
yeah. First Lutheran is a church that, like, my grandparents went to, my dad went to. I mean, I got baptized here at 14, but if I had been baptized as a baby the way that I'm sure my grandmother wanted, then I would have been baptized here. Like, this is my family's church. I think my family's been in this church longer than this church has been in this building.
Oh, I'm sure they have. You know, we don't have a huge, long history here at this site. I mean, it's long enough, but we have First Lutheran has 2 other sites in town. Which is incredible. And so what is your earliest memory of the church then? My
earliest memory of the church is, well, it's probably coming in for Journey of Faith, because that was, I was one of the kids that when I showed up, I was old enough for Sunday school. So sure. I never really sat in service I didn't sit in service until I started confirmation work, I don't think, well, besides holidays.
Sure.
So like, but I remember a lot of like being with the group and playing and doing all that stuff. And I remember how much I enjoyed it. That's part of why I wanted to work with that program once I aged out of it.
Oh, and you do a great job. If you all don't know, Jessi works here on Sunday mornings and throughout the week occasionally as, what's the job? I mean, you work for me, but I don't know what the job is.
I'm listed as youth assistant. So my job is whatever you guys need me for and are willing to pay me for.
Oh, we need you, Jessi. Jessi helps keep our children safe on a Sunday morning, keep them checked in, and then fills in the blanks on Sunday morning. She is an excellent assistant. And, more than an assistant, a real leader within our congregation. So I thank you for that. So Thursday nights we have a Bible study for young adults. Sometimes it's at my home. And I asked Jessi here today because she shared a story about her life that broke my heart a little bit and also encouraged me at the same time. And I called her and said, I think our congregation needs to hear your story if you're willing to share it. So I don't know. You want to take it from there? Or you want me to ask some questions?
I guess I can kind of give an overview of like just kind of the background. I'm going to avoid names because I'm not going to speak very highly of the church.
Yeah, I think that's good to avoid names because that name that you would use could really be any.
Yeah, and I don't like, and a lot of my issues from that church did come from just a personal difference in belief, and I'm not someone that wants to be judging people based on their beliefs. That's just never been my thing. Even if I don't agree with it, I don't judge it. That's not my job. But basically, when I was younger, I grew up, and I still live in a neighborhood that's kind of I call it on the edge, where it's not, I don't know how to word this. It's not like a super low income, like bad neighborhood, but it's definitely not, it's like upper lower class, lower middle class. You know what I'm saying?
I come from the same kind of neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we are a working class neighborhood.
Yeah,
and
that's a good way of putting it.
I think that is a very good way to describe it.
Yeah.
I believe you come from a working class neighborhood.
Yeah. So there was a church that was right across the street. One of my childhood best friends grew up like a couple blocks away. And there was a church that was across the street from them that I got invited to. I want to say I was probably about 8 the first time I went to. They had a Wednesday night youth group that you didn't have to be a member of the church to be in. And their whole thing, or it wasn't their whole thing, but one of the main draws was that they always made food, which sounds crazy. But this was like an area that food security was not super common around me. Like it wasn't like going hungry regularly. But it was definitely like I knew families that would be like, oh, we can't, I didn't have breakfast this morning because we need to save the food for dinner. You know what I mean? A lot of, people getting the leftover snacks from school on the way when we're all walking home.
Sure.
And so I started going because my friend and their older sister went. And I was like, I want to go and hang out with my best friend and their older sister for fun. And I got a very different church experience from the one that I ever got at First Lutheran. It was a church that had significantly different views. It was much more conservative. It was much more, I guess it was technically evangelical leaning, I think would be the technical denomination for it.
Well, it's a leaning.
Yeah,
for sure.
or at least a leaning. Because it wasn't it wasn't a Lutheran church. Which I'd never been to a non-Lutheran church.
Oh, okay. Time to experience the rest.
Yeah. Time to have fun and figure out. It was an interesting time of religious experimentation for me. I'll put it that way.
Oh yeah, the body of Christ is big and varied, and there's lots to learn.
Yeah. I was introduced to a sort of Christianity that I had never interacted with in my. Because their version of preaching the gospel was very, it was a lot, I think the way I described it to my boyfriend was it was, instead of being a lot of yeses, it was a lot of nos.
What do you mean?
I feel like in First Lutheran, at least, we tend to preach very much like yes things that we think are good, things that we want to see. Whereas when I was at this youth group, it was a lot of, you don't want to do this. You can't do this. That's why I say it's more yeses than nos here. Because here we more encourage growth and making like choices, and over there it was a lot more about don't make the wrong choice.
Okay, we've seen that in different.
Yeah, and that's very much still a thing. But I wasn't used to only being hit with don't do this, don't do that, don't act this way, don't talk this way. And it was always really interesting because we would get this big lesson about all of that stuff, and then they'd let us leave, and all of us as kids would go and play in like a field that was right next to it, and we would almost immediately break most of the things they told us not to do. They'd be like, don't swear, and then we would be out there and we would be 8-year-olds cussing for fun. So
just practicing.
Yeah, practicing.
Oh my gosh. Jessi.
Well, it's just how it was. Because we were a mixed age group too. I think it went you could join it. I think the youngest people that were there were I was in the youngest age group. I think it was like you had to be at least 8, but it went up to 16.
Okay.
So it was like, so it was me and a lot of people that were older than me that I was learning I was learning not great lessons from. And most of the people that I was in youth group with weren't going to the church regularly. Like if they asked, they were like, oh, who was here on Sunday? None of the people that like I hung out with were the ones that were at church on Sunday morning.
Sure. Was there food on Sunday mornings?
There was not food on Sunday mornings.
All right, I see the difference now.
I really do think that like offering, they were constantly offering like pizza and bagel bites and like actual real filling food that I think was a big draw for a lot of the people that were there with me.
Well, Jesus used food too. I mean, like eating is a basic need.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
and a lot of these were kids that didn't get pizza very often. They didn't get cupcakes. Like, they couldn't afford, unless it was like, oh, it's someone's birthday, so we're going to pop in a frozen pizza. Like, that was kind of the lifestyle that me and a lot of my friends grew up in.
Sure.
So, looking back, it felt not great that their lead was not come and learn the gospel with us. It was, we have food if you want to come and learn the gospel. Was very much like, that was how it felt when I went in for the first time. I was like, oh, what's the deal here?
Oh, that's kind of like a bait and switch. You felt like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
I can get that. So
Yeah.
I guess that's one thing as a church we need to be careful of, that we are representing ourselves well and honestly.
Yeah.
So that's a good lesson there, Jessi.
Yeah, that's one thing that now as an adult I really appreciate about our church, is that even when we're like, we very much bill our what are more religious celebrations and what are less religious celebrations.
All right.
So some stuff that's better for the community at large and some that's better for the Lutheran community. At least it feels like that to me.
Sure. We have there are things that appeal to us as weirdo Lutherans
Yeah.
that maybe don't appeal to everybody else.
Yeah, maybe not everyone wants to come to our weekly Lenten suppers and our church services, but we get people but I feel like some of our other stuff, like some of our Masterpiece stuff, we get a lot more community members than some of our other stuff. At least I see people at Masterpiece events that I don't see at any other events.
And that's an outreach effort.
Yeah.
And Aubrey McMean, if you don't know her, you should meet her. She's doing
love
a great
Aubrey.
job. I will introduce you to her if I've already introduced you to her 16 times. She's rather new, and she's worth knowing.
Oh, yeah,
So-
absolutely.
So what is being part of First Lutheran, how has that informed your life?
I guess being part of First Lutheran is always kind of, I think it shaped this is going to sound weird, it's shaped my willingness to be, this is going to sound bad, a good host.
What do you mean?
But I mean that in that, whenever I've entered First Lutheran, I've always felt immediately greeted by all of these people that I see every Sunday. And that even if I don't know them personally, I know I can go up and talk to them. And I've always known that, like, the community, like, I've always felt a part of the community. And because I've felt that oneness with my church community, I've always tried to both instill that in the kids that I teach and just the people that I work with, but also just in my day-to-day life, I try to be a person that is approachable and seems like nice and friendly and would help you out, because I like to think that I'm nice and friendly and would help you out.
Well, there's a lot to be said about hospitality at a church. And I'll tell you, what's the piercing? Yeah, what's that called?
The septum piercing.
Okay, Jessi, if you don't know Jessi, she's got a septum piercing. I remember the first week you got the septum piercing, and I was new to working with the Sunday school. And I'm like, Jess, can you tuck that up just till I find out if this is going to kill the dress code? I feel embarrassed that I had to ask you to do that. And I almost feel like I owe you an apology.
See, I never questioned that, because that was one of the things. That's another thing. When I was, I've always been, I don't want to call myself an alternative dresser, because I don't really, I follow genres too carefully to want to label myself alternative. But I'm not the most conventionally leaning person. For those who don't know, I have bright pink hair right now.
I love it.
I'm planning on dyeing it blue next. Little insider for First Lutheran podcast listeners. Jessi's new hair color just dropped.
Watch for the blue. It's for Advent.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I remember when I first started, like, really, when I hit 18 and I could start really changing my appearance how I wanted, I was able to get my first piercing. I was able to start really thinking about tattoos. For those who don't know, I also have 2 tattoos on my arm. I wanted to start dyeing my hair again and all that stuff. And I was worried at first about how that would be accepted here, because First Lutheran does trend a lot older than me and a lot less willing to dye their hair funky colors than me. But
I might have some kinship with blue.
I do. No, but it's just, I remember when I first started doing it, I kept getting compliments. People that would tell me, they were like, oh, I'd never do that myself or whatever, but it looks so nice on you. And I remember thinking that was such a huge thing because I knew that if I had walked into the other church with a septum piercing, it would have been, well, why would you do that? It wouldn't be outward judgment, but it would be, why would you do that? That's not what because I remember that happening to people who got like nose piercings. Cause I was going here in like the late aughts, early 2010s. So nose piercings were what the like nostril piercing or what everyone had. Everyone was getting them. You know the one.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. But I remember people would come in with those, whether they'd done them themselves or their parents had let them, whatever. And it would always be, why would you do that?
No, sure.
It would never be, and it was never a nice, like, oh, like, why'd you decide to do that? Like, when I got my tattoos, people were like, oh, like, what made you decide to get tattoos finally? Where it's like, it was not conversation. It was why.
Judgment.
Yeah.
Judgment. Yeah, I asked about your nose piercing after you got it, and I got affirmative conversation with some board members here that it was within our dress code and fine, and I appreciated that. I appreciated. To me, it sent the message that you're welcome here.
Yeah, I've always been so glad that especially working with kids. Working with the children in the church, I was worried that I might be seen as like not fit, but not a great influence. Because I think a lot of people see the fact that, I try to dress at least a little nicer for church. I'm still comfortable because I'm chasing 4-year-olds around.
We're on the floor.
Yeah, I was like, I spend a lot of time playing cars on my knees on the floor, so I don't want to be wearing a dress.
No.
But, when I'm out of here, I'm wearing a lot more like sweatpants and ripped up like baggy shirts, whatever. I tend to dress a little, I'm a sloppy dresser half the time. I like being comfy. But I know that doesn't project a great image in general. It doesn't, people don't think it projects a good image. I don't think it affects who I am.
Do you know what? We just did this in Sunday school too. And I hope our church embodies this. And it says that, people look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.
Exactly.
And and it sounds like from what you're saying, you found a place that is interested in looking at the heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that I've always appreciated here is like I've never heard I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. I've heard significantly less judgmental words within the walls of this church about my appearance than I have outside of it. I've heard worse comments from my own family about how
family that's what they do, okay?
Oh yeah. And but I also like to make that comparison because a lot of my family is in the church, and I'm not saying that outside of the church they're meaner to me, because they're not, but it's just really funny that sometimes someone will compliment me and I'll look over and make eye contact with cousins and be like, so don't be talking to my grandma about my pink hair anymore. Because sometimes they call her and ask when I'm dyeing it back to brown.
Well, now they can know if they listen that it's going to be
blue. At least partially. I haven't decided if there's anything else yet, but I know blue's going to be there.
What do you hope for our church in the future? What do you hope for?
I hope that we can approach a place of growth. I feel like we've been sustaining really well, but I feel like we haven't been growing as much as, not just the church, but as much as I would like. I'd like to see more families around here, more people my age, I guess.
What's that going to take, Jessi? What do you think?
It's so hard because I know that a big reason why a lot of people my age don't go to church is just a fundamental distrust of like organized religion.
Sure.
I know so many people that will tell me that they're Christian, that they love listening to like different services and learning, but they don't want to commit themselves to one church because they don't want to feel like they're going to be changed by that church. And that's one of the reasons I always suggest First Lutheran for that, because I think we're a good place that's not, we do the teachings of Lutheranism, but we're not like, you have to be Lutheran or else you're wrong.
God, we understand God is way bigger than that.
Yeah.
The church is the body of Christ is a big body.
Exactly.
It has an elbow and a belly button.
Exactly. And I'm just the right elbow. I can't be looking at the left elbow and telling it it's wrong.
Elbows don't have eyes.
Yeah, you know.
So that's right.
But you get what I'm saying.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, because I also make an active effort to make sure that I'm still having... I told you that, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but I try to have theological discussions with people who aren't Christians. I love comparing... I have friends that are not Christian and various levels. Some of them are atheists, some of them are pagan, some of them are Jewish. I have a couple Muslim friends. And I love talking theology with them, and I love comparing with them, especially if they're not in Abrahamic religion, because it's just so interesting to find our similarities and our differences and where we can kind of sit in like that middle ground. And I think the middle ground's the like most interesting place to be.
Oh, that's where a discussion and honesty can happen, and trust.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Let me see. You talked about hosting, like that you've learned to become a good host. And I think that gift of hospitality is something you bring to our children's ministry. I really appreciate that. And it is something, it's a gift I hope that our church brings to our community. Any member or any new face that would walk in here, it'd be my hope that they will be received well.
Yeah.
That we would not be judging on outward appearances, that we will be looking at the heart.
Exactly.
And I think we are practicing doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope as a congregation we do.
I really
continue doing that. So yeah, I'm going to let you give the parting shot here. Is there anything you want us to know? That's a big open question. It's a terrible question, actually, but...
I guess if it's an open answer, I'll give an open answer. Or I guess if it's an open question, I'll give an open answer.
Okay.
I guess the one thing that I'd like people to know is that it's important to interact with other opinions. I think that my faith was very much affirmed by going to a church who preached things that I did not personally believe. Going to a church that told me that I was a sinner for some of the things that I did. Like I am... For those who don't know, I am an LGBT individual. And I was, given the old, you're going to hell because you're LGBT. And having those experiences of being judged and shamed really shaped me into wanting to become the version of God's love and life that I try to project today.
Oh.
And I just think that I would never have gotten that if I hadn't kind of put myself into a situation that probably wasn't great for me, but overall taught me a very important lesson about who I was and who I wanted myself to be and how I wanted to emulate Christ to others.
Jessi Garvin, you bless my heart every day. Aww. I love you.
I love you too.
And I want to thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Good. I know you should meet Jessi. If you don't know her already, find her at church. You guys are going to have a great conversation.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. First Lutheran Church is learning to become genuinely inclusive, thoroughly engaged, externally focused, and relationally centered as we seek to live intentionally like Christ in the world. Embrace the adventure with us. You can find out more about us on our website at flcj.org. We welcome your questions and comments, which can be shared through our contact page. We're also active on Facebook and Instagram.